If you didn't get the chance to play the Diablo IV open beta this weekend because you had plans, or didn't fancy sitting in a login queue for 2 hours on a Friday night like I did, you may not know what the game looks and plays like. So this is a review / impressions video for the beta, having completed the main story and only missing 5 of the 35 possible side quests because I couldn't find out how to start them. I leveled a Necromancer to level 25 and decked him out in full legendary gear, and leveled a Sorcerer to level 20 just to see if Chain Lightning was really as broken as people were saying it was. I will be avoiding any key plot points and story beats in case you want to experience them for yourselves, so if you're worried about something being spoiled, I'll try my best to be vague and focus on the gameplay and technical stuff. So with all that said, let's jump into the good, the bad and the ugly of the Diablo IV beta. Let's start with the positives. The game looks absolutely fantastic to me. Now, I was running on medium settings to avoid the melting of my GPU that some users were reporting, and even then the game looks wonderful. The art style is very dark and gothic, which is a nice departure from the brighter and more colourful palettes of Diablo 3. This lends itself to a darker and grittier experience, which is what Diablo 4 is all about, and as far as tone goes, they nailed it. The main hub city and the little towns scattered all around look really lived in, with plenty of NPCs about, and it just makes the world feel more alive. However, as soon as you leave a town, you will find enemies to combat immediately, and as far as enemy design goes, I think Blizzard have done really well from what we've seen. Enemies look to be quite varied and range from regular skeletons and undead to redesigned Fallen that look much more intimidating than in any previous games. While exploring, you will discover some points that you can walk up to and examine, which will move the camera angle to really show off the environment and world design on offer. Now, there are plenty of criticisms of the game's dungeons and repetition, which we will get to, but the actual design of most of the dungeons I think is really great and atmospheric. The sound design is also some of the best we've had from a Diablo game, with some reused but clearer sound effects that create an instant hit of nostalgia from Diablo games past. Combined with a super polished and carefully thought out sound design for the environment and enemies, it really draws you into the world. Just listen to the Butcher, with his thumping footsteps and chains rattling as he ploughs towards you, adding real immersion and making the encounter extremely tense the first time you meet him. While walking around the main city, you will hear a nice and uplifting soundtrack, which will change to an eerie and unsettling assortment when you're in an icy cave all alone. Item drops and abilities all sound crystal clear, and so far into the game I never encountered any muddy or unclear sound effects, or anything that didn't stand out or was overpowered by other noises. Combat, by and large, feels very good, excluding some balance issues and mechanics which might fundamentally disadvantage certain classes. The abilities I've used all felt good, and the game did not feel unfair at any point, although this is only a beta with a level cap. Every class having access to a dash on a short cooldown helps when you get yourself into a sticky situation, and with gear that can add additional charges to this ability or reduce its cooldown by hitting enemies, I would not be surprised if we do not see some more engaging mechanics from bosses in Diablo 4. Particularly in the endgame. In addition to this, each class has its own mechanics and quests which unlock as you level to add a sense of character identity and uniqueness. Now, on the topic of combat, we can segue into some of the worst features of the game. For starters, class balance. Now, to preface this, we did only play a beta up to level 25, and we have no idea what final numbers will be on release for skills and items. And we do not know what endgame looks like for any characters, so this is purely based on what I played and what I have seen from other streamers. With all that said, I believe that melee classes are going to struggle in Diablo 4, in particular at higher difficulties, due to the number of AoE and area denial effects from bosses. If you look at the boss that I'm currently facing, I'm playing a Necromancer that can kite around with a ranged attack to avoid most of the damage of the boss. If I was playing a Barbarian, I would basically be shouting at it from across a pool of acid until I had an opportunity to attack once the hazard was gone, only to have to run away again and repeat this over and over again. In the beta, I don't think it was a huge issue, but I imagine late in the game and in nightmare dungeons this will be a pain for Druid and Barbarians. Now, Druid and Barbarian were complained about for being too weak in the beta. In particular, the Druid looked to be extremely weak, but I will personally hold off judgment of this until release, when we can level to 100 with the Paragon tree and fully gear up to see how they play. It is my hope that with proper gear and skilling, then all classes and most builds can be viable. Which brings me to my next gripe with Diablo IV, and it is one that may put more casual players off completely. For context, Diablo IV, as far as we know, does not have item sets to provide massive bonuses to builds like Diablo III did, but instead will focus on single gear items with legendary affixes that will make or break your build. These affixes can be removed from a legendary weapon or item at the occultist and imprinted onto any rare gear you find. This will enable you to upgrade your gear if you happen to find an insane upgrade on a rare, but are depending on a legendary effect from your gear to make your build work. On paper, this system actually sounds great, and it would be if it wasn't for one thing: skill respec costs. Diablo IV has a skill tree like most RPGs, and you will inevitably put points into random skills as you level and experiment with your class to see what you like and the direction you want to go down. You can even respec your skills if you want with gold. However, doing so increases the cost of the next respec. So if you make a mistake or want to try another build, then you'll have to pay higher and higher costs. The game developers have actually said that they want the cost to be so high from doing it repeatedly that you would actually be better off making a new character after a certain point. What I hate about this system is the fact that it limits creativity and experimentation. But their itemization system is built around being able to use and remove legendary effects and swap them with gear at any time. The two systems are at odds with each other. What if you get a new piece of gear that augments your basic ability and is rolled perfectly? Well, you need to respec to even be able to test it. Then respec again to swap back if it didn't work or you don't like it. What if your build gets nerfed and is no longer viable at high levels? Well, sorry, you just need to make a new character because you already respec too many times. This is something I hope the devs reconsider their approach to before June comes around. Now let's get to the ugly of the game, the dungeons. Diablo 4's dungeons suck. They really do. As mentioned earlier, they are full of great atmosphere and look incredible, however they are extremely repetitive in the worst possible way. Firstly, the tile sets look extremely similar when you enter certain dungeons, to the point I was actually wondering whether I had already cleared some dungeons that I'd never been in. Even within one dungeon, you will see identical repeated structures and areas, and it is very immersion breaking. Consider as well that these dungeons do not change in their layout, as they are not procedurally generated like in previous games. Even in the main story dungeons, I came across identical sections, and it just made me feel like this was an extremely lazy effort to pad out the game. The developers have stated that the 150 dungeons are the equivalent of D3's rifts, but I can tell you that I would much rather run 50 greater rifts than do the same dungeon twice in Diablo 4. The layout of the dungeons is not all that is repeated. The bosses are reused a few too many times for my liking. I think I faced 5 of the same boss by the end of my time with the game. Again, this could, and hopefully will, change, but based on what I played, the dungeons are the biggest red flag for me when it comes to buying the game on release. I don't want you to think I just hate any repetition, or that I think every dungeon should be completely unique with no assets reused. This is not the case. I got to Paragon 1500 on Diablo 3, and that game is about as repetitive as it gets. My issue with Diablo 4 is what you are repeating. And Blizzard seem to have actually gone backwards when designing these dungeons. Every single one can be boiled down to: run the main path, killing enemies that are very sparse, come to a door that is locked, branch either 2 or 3 ways to either destroy or retrieve 2 or 3 objects. The door unlocks and you enter an identical square boss room to fight a boss you've already encountered in another dungeon. On top of this, some of the dungeons are huge, and with a very slow walk speed they take ages to traverse, and you can easily miss one of the 3 objectives. The most egregious of these being the slay all enemies objective, which will have you running around looking for one skeleton you missed or you thought you'd already killed. The footage currently playing is one dungeon where I happened to get unlucky and find the main path all the way to the locked door. This meant backtracking all the way through the dungeon, which was now mostly empty as I had killed everything on my way there. This was the first experience that made me realise this would need to change. The game has a fair few bugs and janky interactions, which I would say is to be expected of a beta. However, the reality is the game is 2 months away from release, and I would imagine what we played is what we will get. There was a significant amount of pop-in happening, with the most extreme example being this stronghold I was going to take, which actually glitched me into a wall. I would think this will resolve quickly upon release and may have to do with server loads being very high, but at the same time I fully expect servers to crash on release. It has happened to most of the games I've played over their release week, and I expect this one to be no different. Something I cannot forgive, however, is missing functionalities and things that are not clear to the players. For example, when you complete the Necromancer quest at level 25 to unlock the Golem, as I covered in my previous video, it actually doesn't automatically assign itself, and you need to go into the skill assignment menu and assign it to your skill bar. This is something the game does not tell you, and you don't have to do for your other skills to do similar things. This in itself is an issue and can be resolved with a quick tooltip fix. However, for console players, this option is missing completely, and there is no way to assign this skill to your bar. This means that if you're playing the game on console, as a Necromancer, you can complete the quest, and you can just be missing a third of your summons for no reason. Issues like this I would expect to be patched and fed back to Blizzard and resolved by release, but on the off chance that they're not, this really needs to be addressed as soon as possible. So, ultimately, is Diablo IV a good game as far as I can tell from what I've played? I would say yes. I love the series, and I think the game has the potential to be an amazing ARPG. However, will I be pre-ordering it? No. I think there are some core mechanics and gameplay choices covered in this video which may actually be off-putting enough to ruin the game for me if they stay as they are. So I will be holding off until at least a day or two after release to see if I'm going to buy it, and I fully understand people who've refunded their pre-order after playing the beta this weekend. So what did you think of the beta? Comment below your favourite thing about it and also something you hope improves in the next 2 months. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.